Brayden Thibault was born on March 5, 2000. At age 17, he lived in St. Stephen, New Brunswick, Canada, and was described as a funny and sarcastic individual. He was a junior at St. Stephen High School, a star athlete, a devoted grandson, and a beloved brother to 5 siblings. Unfortunately, during the summer of 2017, he strangely disappeared. For 2 weeks before he vanished, Brayden had been visiting friends about an hour and a half away in Fredericton. While there, the teenagers hung out and played basketball. On the morning of Monday, July 31st, 2017, the day he disappeared, he was in regular contact with his family through calls, text, and Facebook. In what would be their final conversation, his mother, Amanda Frigault, recalled giving him a heartfelt mom speech about making good choices. Brayden ended the call by promising he'd be back in a couple of days, and they exchanged affectionate I love yous, with Brayden responding, I love you more, Mama. That very afternoon, Brayden was last seen on Gibson Street on the north side of Fredericton. Almost immediately after he vanished, police informed Amanda that they believed he had been murdered. However, it wasn't until 3 months later that the Canadian Mounted Police's Major Crime Unit reclassified his disappearance from a missing person case to a suspected homicide, and then it wasn't made official until 2 years later on July 30th, 2019. Despite initial searches, few concrete details emerged. There were many rumors, such as he had been seen in a vehicle or on the side of the road or in a store. Sadly, Amanda remained in the dark about the true last known location. Over time, frustration grew as the delay in treating his case as a homicide seemed to hamper progress, leaving many to wonder if key information was being withheld. In February 2018, Amanda issued a public statement expressing the family's ongoing anguish and urging anyone with information to come forward.
I love you more, Mama, were the last words I heard my son say. That was more than 7 months ago, and since then, I have relived every moment of the last 17 years of his life, every achievement, every struggle, and all the moments in between. I want to speak from my heart today to tell you about my son. Not out of fear or anger. It's difficult, though, not to be angry or to be scared. Angry that I couldn't protect him. Angry that someone knows what's happened to him but will not come forward, and scared that I may never find him. I miss my son. His smiles, his hugs, his sense of humor, and his sarcasm. I'd never thought I'd miss hearing him fight with his brother and sister, but I miss that too. I miss hearing the terrible rap music he listened to. I miss seeing him dance with his little sister just to make her smile. I miss fighting about curfews and cleaning his room. But what I miss most is his kind soul and his beautiful heart. I miss watching him play sports. People often told me I would see Brayden in the Olympics someday. He was an exceptional athlete and was the happiest on a football and soccer field or a wrestling mat. Brayden is a son, a brother, an uncle, grandson, nephew, and a friend to so many. I feel incredibly helpless knowing I can't take away their fears or give them answers. I've watched my children lose their innocence when I had to tell them that Brayden just wasn't away somewhere, and I have held the broken hearts of the people he loved most. I want to thank our friends and our community for praying for my son, our family, and the many strangers who have prayed for a boy that they have never met. I ask that you continue, but add a prayer for the people who have information, that they will have the courage and the compassion to come forward. You all have someone in your life that you love, and if you were forced to live a moment of this nightmare, I would pray that the people who had information would come forward. My family is asking for the same respect and compassion that we would show yours. If you have any information about what's happened to my son or where he is, please contact the police or Crime Stoppers. Please help them find Brayden. Help them bring him home, and help begin to heal the hearts of all the people who love him.
By August 2019, the Canadian Mounted Police had expanded their search to include areas in Moncton and conducted further investigations near McMiniman Court in Fredericton, about 2.5 miles from Gibson Street where he was last seen, using search crews and air assets, but nothing was found, or if something was found, the public wasn't made aware. Brayden Thibault disappeared on July 31st, 2017, and as of March 2025, this case remains unsolved. 28 years old, Carrie Singer was living with her boyfriend, Robert DeZern, in Hampton, Virginia. Originally from Jacksonville, Florida, Carrie had moved to Virginia only a few months prior with hopes of building a new life. She had a fiery personality and was known for being strong-willed, though her social circle in Virginia remained small, making it harder for investigators to piece together her life before tragedy struck. On July 1, 2004, a farmer in Isle of Wight County, Virginia, stumbled upon a grisly scene. The partially unclothed body of Carrie lying near the edge of a dirt road close to Morgart's Beach. She had been brutally beaten to death before being dumped in an isolated field. The brutality of Carrie's murder shocked investigators. She had suffered severe blunt force trauma to the head, and due to the time her body was exposed to the elements, combined with the damage caused by animals, police were unable to determine if she had been sexually assaulted. The environmental exposure also complicated the collection of forensic evidence, initially leaving investigators with little to no leads. They would soon discover that 2 days before her body was found, she had a violent altercation with Robert at their home in Hampton. However, it was determined that she had been the aggressor, and following the dispute, she left the home. The next day, she checked into the King James Motel in Newport News and withdrew money from an ATM at a nearby 7-Eleven on Jefferson Avenue. This was her last known activity. Initially, Robert was considered a prime suspect in Carrie's murder. However, after fully cooperating with investigators and passing a polygraph test, he was eventually ruled out. He later passed away in 2013. With little to go on, investigators regrouped and turned to advancements in forensic science for help. In 2017, over a decade after her murder, the Isle of Wight County Sheriff's Office released new information. Utilizing DNA phenotyping technology through Parabon Nanolabs, they created a composite image of the suspect based on DNA evidence recovered from the crime scene. The results indicated that Carrie's killer was likely a Hispanic or Latino male. This forensic breakthrough offered hope of solving the case, but also presented challenges, as the composite image could not predict factors like age, weight, or hairstyle. 2 versions of the suspect were released, approximating how he might have looked at 25 and 55 years old. Detectives believe Carrie's violent nature could have played a role in the events leading up to her murder. It's possible she crossed paths with someone unwilling to back down, sparking a confrontation that ended in tragedy. According to her mother, the Killings Fields television show, in an attempt to entice and engage viewers, manufactured a timeline and inaccurately portrayed events while featuring Carrie's case, which, if true, is very unethical. Carrie Singer was found murdered on July 1, 2004, and as of March 2025, this case remains unsolved. Christopher James Rivers was born on October 14, 1972, and spent most of his life in Porcupine, Ontario. By his mid-40s, he was well known in his community and had an established life in the area. Everything seemed normal until one day he vanished without a trace. On August 29, 2017, Christopher was last seen in Timmins, Ontario. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at the time, but just over a week later, on September 6, 2017, his vehicle was found abandoned deep in a wooded area off Murphy Road. The discovery sparked concern and confusion, and despite the unsettling circumstances, the search for Christopher only lasted a few days. What makes Christopher's disappearance even more eerie is the fact that 10 years earlier, in July 2007, another man, Luciano Triniostic, had gone missing in almost the exact same location. At 79 years old, Luciano had left his home for a routine trip to go blueberry picking in an isolated area near Highway 655. He never returned. His vehicle was found on July 25, 2007, parked along Murphy Road, but something was off. His blueberry baskets remained inside, untouched. The windows were rolled down, which was unusual for Luciano, who always made sure to lock his car and hide the keys on a back tire. It was as if he had simply vanished. The similarities between the two cases are unsettling. Christopher's and Luciano's vehicles were found just 400 feet apart in an area known for its dense wilderness and challenging terrain. Murphy Road itself is the unofficial name for the long stretch connecting Highway 655 to Florence Street near the Bell Creek mine site. It's an area where few people venture without a reason, raising even more questions about what might have happened to both men. Despite investigations and volunteer searches, no definitive answers have been found. The families of Christopher Rivers and Luciano Triniostic has been left haunted by the mystery of Murphy Road, a place where two men seemingly disappeared into thin air a decade apart, and as of March 2025, they've never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Pamela Jane Holopainen was born on August 1, 1981, in Hamilton, Ontario. Pamela was the younger of two sisters with a close bond to her older sibling, Vanessa Brousseau. In 1982, the family moved to South Porcupine, a neighborhood of Timmins, where Pamela became actively involved in the Indigenous community efforts and later served as president of the Timmins Native Friendship Center. Unfortunately, in 2003, she would strangely disappear. On the night of December 13th, 22-year-old Pamela asked her sister Vanessa to babysit so she and her common-law partner, Chris Manchester, could attend a house party. Vanessa already had prior arrangements, so Pamela left her children with someone else. The party would not end well, with Pamela and Chris getting into a heated argument around 2 the next morning. Upset, Pamela left the party on foot with the intention of walking back to her apartment. Partygoers would say that Chris was following close behind. However, after leaving, Pamela was never seen again. Vanessa tried calling her the next day, but only reached her voicemail. In the days leading up to Christmas, Vanessa attempted to drop off gifts for Pamela's sons, but received no response. All of this was very alarming because Vanessa usually spoke with Pamela several times a day. However, she assumed Pamela and the kids were with Chris and his family celebrating the upcoming holiday. However, Christmas 2003 came and went, and with no call or visit from Pamela, her loved ones knew something was terribly wrong. And then on New Year's Eve, the family heard a story that sent Vanessa and her mom to the police station. While at the bingo hall in Timmins, a woman approached them and asked if they'd heard that Pamela had left Chris. Of course, at this point, they had not heard anything and were shocked and immediately began asking where the kids were. It turns out the kids were with Chris, and no one knew where Pamela was or had been since the night of the party. At that point, they went straight to the police to report her missing. However, police dismissed their concerns and told them to wait a few days because Pamela was probably out drinking. As days turned into weeks, the lack of support from law enforcement forced Pamela's family to begin their own search, reaching out to friends and contacts. Chris claimed that Pamela had returned home with him after the party, but had left again while he was sleeping. As suspicions around Chris's involvement grew, he distanced himself from the family and showed little interest in participating in efforts to raise awareness about Pamela's disappearance. On January 4, 2004, Timmins police finally issued a missing person notice, but insisted there was no suspicion of foul play. They even suggested Pamela might have moved to Hamilton and was working as a prostitute, claims that deeply upset her family. In an insensitive move, police presented a nude photo found on Pamela's home computer as supposed evidence supporting this theory. It wasn't until May 2004 that the Ontario police joined the investigation and conducted thorough searches in the Timmins area. During a search of her apartment, investigators found blood on the walls, floor, and door, yet no charges were ever filed. A search of the Deloro landfill site using cadaver dogs and excavators also turned up no new evidence. After Pamela's disappearance, her mother, Holly Kaltuk, took legal action in family court, seeking joint custody of Pamela's two young sons. The court granted her joint custody, allowing her grandsons to spend weekends with her until her death in 2007 at the age of 45. Meanwhile, the children alternated between living with their father, Chris, and being placed in foster care through the Children's Aid Society. Despite the evidence of domestic violence, blood in her apartment, and suspicions surrounding her common-law partner, no one has ever been charged in connection with Pamela's disappearance. Despite conducting over 100 witness interviews, Pamela's whereabouts remained unknown. At the time of her disappearance, Pamela stood 5 foot 2 inches, weighed 126 pounds, and had long brown hair and blue eyes. She had a medium build, a fair complexion, and 2 tattoos on her left hand, one of a web pattern between her thumb and index finger, and the initials DI. She was last seen wearing a purple Columbia winter jacket, a silver necklace with an eagle pendant, and several rings. There's a $50,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest and conviction. Pamela Holopainen went missing on December 14, 2003, and as of March 2025, this case remains unsolved. It was a bitterly cold day in St. Louis, Missouri, on February 28, 1983, when 2 men searching for scrap metal stumbled upon a discovery that would haunt them forever. As one of them flicked on a lighter to illuminate the darkness of an abandoned basement, the small flame cast a glow over something on the floor. What they saw sent chills down their spines. Lying face down, motionless, was the headless body of a young girl. Her wrists were bound tightly behind her back with red and white nylon rope. Mold had begun to grow around the area where her head should have been, a grim indicator that she had been there for days. She was naked from the waist down, but she wore a yellow V-neck sweater soaked in blood with its tag removed. Authorities arrived quickly and examined the gruesome scene. At first, investigators suspected they had found the remains of an adult prostitute, but as they turned her over, it became horrifyingly clear this was a child. The St. Louis Jane Doe, as she would later be called, was believed to be between 8 and 11 years old. Despite nationwide efforts, no one came forward to claim her, and she didn't match any missing person reports at the time. Investigators combed through local schools, foster care systems, and runaway reports, hoping someone would recognize her, but all efforts turned up empty-handed. It was as if she had never existed. She was ruled out as a match in multiple missing persons cases across several states. Eventually, forensic researchers determined she had likely spent most of her life in one of the following states: Georgia, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Louisiana, or one of the Carolinas. With no leads, she was buried as a Jane Doe in the Calvary Cemetery in St. Louis. Despite the lack of answers, one suspect captured the attention of investigators, Vernon Brown, whose history was as disturbing as the crime itself. In 1973, Brown dropped out of high school and was convicted of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl. After serving 4 years in prison, he was released. Just a year later, 9-year-old Kimberly Campbell vanished. Her body was later discovered in a vacant home owned by Brown's grandmother. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Yet somehow Brown was never charged. Years later, in 1985, he moved to St. Louis under the alias Thomas Turner, living with his wife and stepchildren. 1 year later, on October 24, 1986, 9-year-old Janet Perkins stepped off the school bus. As she walked past Brown's house, he was waiting on his front porch and lured her inside. Once she was in his home, he ordered his stepchildren into their rooms, then locked their doors from the outside. Janet was taken to the basement, tied up, and strangled with a rope. Brown's stepchildren heard her screams and desperate pleas for her life, but they were powerless to stop what was happening. 3 days later, on October 27, 1986, Janet's lifeless body was discovered. A neighbor had seen her enter Brown's house, and when police confronted him, he confessed, not only to Janet's murder, but also to the 1985 murder of 19-year-old Sonetta Ford. Investigators repeatedly questioned Brown about the St. Louis Jane Doe, but he never confessed. For decades, the case remained stagnant. Then forensic genealogy brought a glimmer of hope. In the documentary Our Precious Hope, researchers revealed that a familial match had been made through a genealogy database. A woman was found to be closely related to the St. Louis Jane Doe. Authorities reached out to her, but instead of helping, she refused to cooperate. And then she did something chilling. She removed her profile from the Ancestry site. Why would she do this? Was she protecting someone? Did she know the truth behind the young girl's death? To this day, the St. Louis Jane Doe remains unidentified. It's been over 40 years, and the little girl found bound and headless in that abandoned basement is still nameless. Who was she? Who took her life? And why has no one ever come forward? Perhaps the answer lies with the one person who refused to cooperate. Or maybe, one day, DNA advancements will finally give her her name back. But as of March 2025, this case remains unsolved.